North American accounts of the giant skeletons that were found in the Ohio and Pennsylvania Valley. I'm talking everything from 10 to 12-foot tall guys found in copper armor. And the more I investigated, I found out it was a worldwide situation where we're talking some really big skeletons, all the way up to 36 feet tall.
If we only had basketball then, huh?
Well, I can tell you this, when some of these guys, some of the British giants, for instance, one guy specifically, listen to this, a guy by the name of William Joyce in the late 1800s, he could lift a ton dead weight, in other words, 2,000 pounds. And that you're only talking about a guy that was 8 feet tall. So I think the situation that most people find in history is there are too many question marks. And when you're looking at the temples of the world, and you're looking at all of the, what would you say, the answers that are out there, but seemingly are, swept under the rug, I think it becomes apparent that for some reason, someone doesn't want the issue of giants brought up.
How tall do you think the little guy is in the middle on your cover of your book, Genesis 6?
According to they claim he's right at 6 feet. When I got that from a group of people in London that have the only photos of these guys around. Also in the book, I have a picture of a 12'2" Irish mummy. And it's fascinating because, later in the show we can get into the mummy issue, but the point that's fascinating is if you take guys that are all the way up to 36 feet tall, 20 feet tall, the Emperor of China had two 15-foot guards. Charlemagne himself was surrounded by rather large individuals. We have a Roman emperor named Maximinius who was a giant himself. His wife's bracelet, George, would fit around his thumb. We're talking about people that are, we're talking about people with big egos, big appetites, and incredible strength. We're not talking about the medical situation that you see sometimes on the History Channel where they show giants as being these guys that don't live very long, obviously like Andre the Giant, who was a wrestler. Right. We're talking about guys with unbelievable strength, unbelievable knowledge, and unbelievable wisdom. On the website, I even show some of the Incan kings, I-N-C-A-N, Inca, from the Inca Empire, basically in the museums of Peru, that have 4 to 5 times the cranial mass of a standard human skull. So we're not only talking about big guys, we're talking about people with incredible intelligence, and we're talking about an answer that obviously classical anthropology and archaeology, these guys don't want to deal with this. I think it was David Hatcher Childress that coined the word Smithsonian gate. In other words, a cover-up of history that's rather pronounced. And when you begin to dig, as I began digging over 30 years ago, you can find out that the reports of newspapers in America, of newspapers around the world. Interestingly enough, after I did the last show with Art, somebody went on the website and they sent me from Eastern Europe, they've already sponsored I guess you'd say an undertaking to go into some of the caves where they found a whole, basically, cavern of giant skeletons. And in the New Ancient American, which is a magazine that's put out in America, they found the most contemporary find it someplace in desert Southwest, and it actually shows the pictures of the giants, shows the cave, etc. So basically, interestingly enough, too, is that when you look at this, you see that there is a very, very, how should I say, skittish archaeological base out there that doesn't even want to deal with this.
Do you want to see how they keep everyone in the dark with this whole Smithsonian Nephilim giant human skeleton topic? Let me show you how they do it. And this article is a perfect example on this website, World News Daily Report. Now this article is actually fake and is talking about fake things intentionally to throw people off. Obviously, they're hoping truthers will latch onto this article and make videos. And there's actually people that have done it and actually made massive videos. Like this guy here, 147,000 subscribers. Of course, he doesn't know what's really, going on here. But let me just show you kind of what they're doing. Okay. If you check at the bottom of this article, way at the bottom, you'll see two things that really give it away. You see, nobody's buying, and even worse, far worse, is right at the bottom of the page entirely. New World Order Media. Okay, now this website is a Zionist website created by some people in Israel claiming to be Christians, Muslims, and Jews working together in this website. Alleged news source, but actually, if you look at their About Us page, they even say that this is for entertainment purposes only. American Jewish Zionist newspaper. We're based in Tel Aviv, 1988. And let's see here. Yeah, here we go, down here. World News Daily Report assumes all responsibility for the satirical nature of this article, for the fictional nature of its content. All characters appearing in these articles on this website, even those based on real people, are entirely fictional. Any resemblance between them and any person, living or dead, is purely a miracle. So this is clearly a mock towards truthers. This whole entire website is a mock. They're expecting you to pick up on their articles. They're expecting you to, just eat this up and then go report it and then discredit you. That's kind of the idea of what they're doing here. And of course, they work off directly off Snopes. Snopes literally uses these websites all the time. They just literally pick up articles off these websites they know are satirical, fictional, which is intentional. They're literally trying to mislead people. And Snopes basically just uses these articles to debunk, when it doesn't even take a rocket scientist to debunk it, because it tells you it's fake. On their About Us page, it tells you they're New World Order media at the bottom of their page, and they tell you that it's fictional in nature. So they tell you up front, this is all fake. So is Snopes really doing anything for us? No, other than COINTELPRO. They're actually part of it. So they're doing it on purpose to discredit truthers, to discredit anybody trying to seek the truth on topics like this. Now, of course, it actually is true. The Smithsonian have destroyed thousands of giant human skeletons. This is the whole point. They take something that's actual truth, they have someone falsely report it, making up fictional information, then these guys debunk it, all to basically throw everybody off and say, oh, it's just a bunch of bull crap. In reality, they never did this. That's the entire point of this whole thing. So this is very interesting. I wanted to point this out to you guys so you could see kind of how they work. It's really kind of retarded, but everybody falls for this stuff. Obviously, those who follow secular archaeology think, oh, look, see, this proves it. This debunks it, that it's all bullcrap. See, look, Snopes already debunked it. So that's the whole point of why they do this. I went through this video, and some of the things that were very interesting were when he was reading historical accounts from various people in the 1600s. They went to Peru, when they conquered the Incas. Okay, when the conquistadors went in and conquered the Incas, the Inca, dynasty, whatever you want to call it. They went in, obviously they conquered them with the sword and also with disease, because they brought diseases that killed them off. But what's interesting is if you look into their writings from various, Jesuit, Dominican clerics and Jesuit monks, and just Augustinian monks, and they were not just monks. Some of these people were also just scientists that were, commissioned by the church as well, and historians that were commissioned by the church. And there's several writings they cite in this movie, where it clearly indicates that there were giants. And here's the interesting part. Here is the interesting part about all this. The history books that you read when you were in high school, when you were in middle school, were written by historians who read from these historical works, various historical works, and they just picked and chose what they wanted to present. So they read something like this here. Reginaldo, I don't know how to pronounce this, Dominican cleric and chronicler, a brief description of the land of Peru, 1595. Here we go. There were once giants here, and natives say they don't know from hence they came. Their houses were 3 leagues below the anchorage, made of 2 gables with very large beams. Now, actually what they're showing in the scene here was quoted, I think, a little bit later on, but what they were is actually 30-foot tall giants that were basically rotting, that they found in around the 1600s when they conquered the Incas. Rotting corpses of giants that were 30 foot tall that they ended up burning and incinerating, just destroying them, because they were used as idol worship in a cave. So this is in a cave, the setting is a cave, and they were doing human sacrifice unto these dead gods. Obviously not gods, but they considered them gods. 30-foot tall giants, hundreds of human bodies sacrificed to them. Okay, this is what they encountered in a certain village in Peru. So some crazy stuff, obviously, right? But I'm not going to play this video, obviously, because I'm just trying to give you a little bit of review of this video, just show you a couple little stills from the video, and encourage you to go buy it because it's really spectacular. I mean, I haven't seen the whole thing, but it's really nice. It's only $9.95, and actually you can rent it for $4.95. You can pay $5 and watch this whole thing, but I paid so I could have it basically, like it says here, you own this or whatever you want to call it, but which means I can just play it whenever I want to. Added to this are known traditions that all these giants, whose bones are still seen until this day in this beautiful place, died in the flames because of young, handsome men. These Indians did not know how to... Oh yeah, I wanted to tell you about the scene. I'm not going to tell you everything, obviously. I'm just going to tell you a few things from this video. This is really spectacular. This is just so spectacular. Okay, this is from an Augustinian monk, anthropologist. He wrote it in the Moral Chronicle of the Order of St. Augustine of Peru, 1663. Okay, so what this guy is doing is he's retelling what these, do they call them Peruvians? These people who lived in Peru, I guess they were part of the Incas or whatever, however you want to call them, Incas, Peruvians, I don't know what you call it, Indians. Okay, we'll just call them Indians here. These Indians from that region have a story that was passed down to them about giants. Some of the antediluvian giants, from what I understand, that came to the land and basically took over. They're about 15 foot tall. They took over and they were killing off some of the people and basically controlling the land. They had basically control of the land, sort of like overlords, I guess you would say. And what they would do is these giants that came, some of them were naked, some of them weren't. Okay, they came in these reed-formed ships. They somehow made ships out of reed. And when they came over, they had no women. It was just all male Nephilim giant offspring. And what they would do is they would steal the women from the Indians and basically rape them and try to impregnate them, and actually would kill them in the process often. From what I understand, it basically they mostly all died because you're talking about a 15-foot giant raping a 5-foot tall woman. Obviously, it's not going to work out in any way, shape, or form. It's just crazy. So these evil beings, what they ended up doing is they would have gay sex out in the open and do other crazy stuff, obviously. And they were very evil. They were killing all these women. They were also fighting the people of the land and doing other types of abominable acts. But what ended up happening, and this is what's being said here, a young, handsome man in the sky took out a sword and threw a lightning bolt down on these giant Nephilim offspring and killed them, incinerated them. So what we're talking about here is likely an angel of God. You know, usually angels of God are considered to be very handsome looking men, with a sword, basically threw a lightning bolt at them and destroyed them all. And this is the story. And this is not from the Bible. This isn't from the Book of Enoch or Book of Jubilees. This is a story from Indians in Peru. It sounds exactly like something. It sounds kind of like a mix between Sodom and Gomorrah's judgment and, sort of like what you see in the Book of Enoch. It's just, it sounds like it really correlates. And all these myths, as they call them myths, correlate so well with these stories, these ancient stories from the Book of Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees, which also mysteriously were buried. So we have the Catholic Church, Rome, the Vatican, burying the Book of Enoch, which was rediscovered in Africa in, I think, 1780s or so. We have the Book of Jasher and Jubilees, which also was, essentially kicked out as being pseudepigraphical, or basically erroneous, falsely ascribed texts. You know, these books are critical to understanding Genesis 6, right? But the church got rid of these books. The church, we're talking Rome here, gets rid of all these giant skeleton bones. This church, right? Who are they really serving? And now they're talking about some aliens coming to be a part of society, and that aliens could get saved. We know that this Vatican is working with the Nephilim. It sounds to me that's what they're doing behind the scenes. It's pretty obvious to me. Back around 1910, the Arizona Gazette published a story about finding Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon, that 2 Smithsonian workers had found them. And after this was published, not too long later, the Smithsonian denied that these 2 men worked for the Smithsonian, that they had uncovered anything. And what's so interesting about it is around 100 years later, not too long ago, back in 2013, the Smithsonian actually admitted that these men worked for them in a article they published on their own website. So for 100 years they denied that these men worked for them, and then they admitted it 100 years later in 2013. Okay, so they actually are admitting that these 2 men did work for them, and they had actually lied for 100 years about them working for them. These men published that there were Egyptian artifacts found in the Grand Canyon. What's really interesting about that is there's actually an area in the north part of the Grand Canyon which are named after Egyptian names that are off limits to all people. Even low-level government employees can't go to these areas. The names of the mountain of Ra, Osiris Temple, Isis Temple, and these are likely where they actually found these artifacts, which of course the public cannot see, the public cannot know about. It's just yet another Smithsonian cover-up that they have actually revealed themselves on by publishing in 2013 that this man did indeed work for them. It's sort of interesting, right? Maybe because there was a lot of evidence coming out that they indeed did work for him. There was a man that was basically uncovering it, David Hatcher Childress, and so much information had come out that they actually had to admit that the man worked for them. So this is basically their way of doing PR in case too much comes out and it explodes in their face. They say, well, we did admit that he worked for us, 100 years after they had lied for 100 years, right? So this very interesting study here. Ancient humans had sex with non-humans. They see a significant difference between the DNA of this other population. Of course, they can't conveniently find any specimens, any skeletal structure or whatever of this alleged other species, which sort of points to what we've been discussing on video many times, that the Nephilim did indeed live, the giants of old, and humans did indeed breed with them. And of course, the Smithsonian, as we've pointed out and shown evidence of, have covered it up. And this is yet another proof of it. The fact that they have scientific evidence of humans breeding with non-humans, or some sort of species that's they call proto-human, they call it a ghost species, hominins, that are basically human-like. New research shows ancient humans had sex with non-human species, according to a study conducted by Omer Galkuman, an assistant professor of biological sciences at the University of Buffalo. Ancient humans had intercourse with a ghost species or a proto-human. Galkuman explains humans are only one member of a broader species named hominins. The research found that humans had sex with other members of the hominins group. He found wildly different genes in DNA of humans living in sub-Saharan Africa. He believes these genes can be traced back to about 150,000 years ago, when ancient humans were breeding with this mysterious ghost species. Of course, we have several ancient texts talking about this. Humans living in sub-Saharan Africa. He believes these genes can be traced back to about 150,000 years ago, when ancient humans were breeding with this mysterious ghost species. Of course, we have several ancient texts talking about this. The Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilees, Book of Jasher, Genesis Apocryphon, pretty much, I mean, there's so many. I mean, these are, pseudepigraphical texts, apocryphal texts. There's actually a lot of texts that are not completely unrelated, to the Old Testament or that time frame, that say the same type of thing as well. This other species is referred to by the scientific community as a ghost species, as there are no known fossils that can be analyzed. Why? Because the Smithsonian removed them. Okay, and we have documented evidence of them doing this. We have newspaper clippings from the 18 to 1900s proving they found mounds with giant skeletons, 11 to 12 foot tall often, with double rows of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes, often with red hair. The red-haired giants, particularly in America, a lot of these mounds that were dug up in Ohio, Indiana, many other states, Montana, all have this exceptional height of being 11 or 12 feet tall often, and having these weird attributes such as double rows of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes. And we also have the American Indians telling stories about these people as well, but yet we have no evidence of them. We have very few physical specimens of it. Of course, there are some. Of course, the Smithsonian doesn't claim to have any, yet they are the ones who actually took many of them and somehow done away with them. And this is why they have no known fossils that can be analyzed, because they don't want you to know about it. It was to fit a narrative of evolution. This didn't fit evolution's narrative. Then we have the fact that there are about 1,000 different newspaper articles from the 18 and 1900s that talk about excavations of giant skeletons. We have this one here from 1904 in the St. Paul Globe. I mean, we can just keep clicking here. Giant skeletons found. The first one I showed you was 11 foot tall. This one's 12 feet in length. New York Times, 1902. The other one was 1904. Skeleton 7 feet long in Ohio. Published on 1885 in the New York Times. Yet another New York Times one here in 1908. Found in a cave in Mexico. Boston. 200 skeletons found, and above 8 feet in height. So a lot of these have just mysteriously disappeared. Often it's the Smithsonian, sometimes it's the Vatican that's involved. It's sort of a connection with a narrative that they want to give the public. Sometimes the FBI has even come in when certain things have been dug up, from what I've heard. If it gets out you know, if the information gets out that they found, like some farmer found some body that's 8 foot or 9 foot tall, some skeleton, and if he tells the wrong people, next thing you know, a lot of people come, FBI, or I guess you would say in black suits, and remove the excavated skeleton, and you never hear about it again. Here we have 15 to 20 skeletons in Larteh Lake in Natchez, looks like Mississippi there. Mexico, 16 giants are dug up by workmen. Of course, we're talking also England. King Arthur might have also been a giant from what I saw in just a recent video. Very interesting. And Stonehenge being actually built by men that I'm trying to remember his Merlin the magician employed. He allegedly employed some giants from Ireland to build Stonehenge, and I thought that was very interesting. King Arthur's body was dug up. They found a cross, and about, I think it was 12 feet below that, the cross said it was the burial site of King Arthur. The burial site said it was the body of King Arthur. The cross that they found in this mound said it was the burial site of King Arthur, and they dug down about another 6 to 10 feet, I think it was, and they found a large coffin with a person of exceptional size. I think he was like 8 or 9 feet tall, and they think it might have been the body of King Arthur. Indian skeletons found under Oklahoma mound. Treasured finds, large femur indicating its owner must have been at least 9 foot tall. And there's thousands of these newspaper clippings that, and actually it's very interesting because it seems like Google's, as you know of Google's recent censorship of information, particularly information that doesn't fit the common alleged science. And we know how Google's been in trouble about science of recent with the leaked Google memo from a former Google engineer, where he actually laid out science, and he was fired for the science of just pointing out traits within populations that, certain, male and female gender have certain traits that are differing from each other in some respects. And that for some reason meant he was sexist and he was fired, but actually 4 scientists have already backed him up as being scientifically accurate in his analysis. He had detailed sourced material in his memo, 3,000 word memo, from what I understand it was. And, so Google's already claiming, that they're going to be using like the Anti-Defamation League and all these far left progressive groups to basically tell you, and of course Snopes, to basically sift through information online and basically block it so you don't get to see fake news, as they call it, right? So you can't see alternative viewpoints on history. They're already starting to block it. I had to do sort of a different search to get this. If I just put in newspaper giants, it'll be like New York Giants. But if you do it on Bing, it actually comes up with the giants, newspaper clippings of giants. But on Google, if you type it in a certain way without the word skeleton, it just talks about football teams and tries to hide this information more so than Bing. And I've noticed that on a few other searches of recent. So I'm actually starting to move towards using Bing more. Not in every case, but I would recommend you using Google and Bing at the same time. Do the same search on both to see if Google's trying to cover up something, because they're already changing the search results. They're already making it so you can't find information on topics. Of course, they had that Google Owl that was recently released, where majority opinion basically snuffs out minority opinion or alternative viewpoints. So that's what they're doing. They're already trying to basically shield you from any information that contradicts what the elite want you to believe. Okay? So there's thousands of these newspaper clippings. I highly recommend you go around and save them. Save the images you find, because they might not be there much longer. considering how Google's been trying to censor everything. I would highly recommend start saving information you find online, even this video here, because you never know how long this information is going to be out there when you have people who don't want you to know about it. Because you don't know how long this information is going to be around in the future, with the internet being more and more controlled. Beach giant skulls unearthed by WPA workers near Victoria. The San Antonio Press. Let's see what we have here. I don't know how big this is. Okay, here we go. This is a little bit better. Human body bones unearthed. Let's see, how big? They claim it's from 40,000 years ago. I can't see the size. It doesn't say the size. Offhand, I don't see it. So, it says it found several giant skeletons there. Old graves, skeletons of giant warriors unearthed in France. Claims to be from 25,000 years ago. There was also a giant skeleton that was basically on display and moved around in England. That was about 12 foot tall, that mysteriously disappeared on a train ride back to London. This stuff seems to happen a lot. A lot of these giant skeletons mysteriously disappear just out of nowhere. And we have a lot of stories about the Vatican telling them to break up and destroy these bones. We even have, even back in the 1400s, with the conquistadors, their own historical writings that indicate they found giant human skeletons in South America. That the Incas were actually worshiping in a cave, a certain area, 3 massive giants that were dead sitting on thrones. These giants, their bones were destroyed. This is what the Vatican had them do. They had them destroy the bones. Now, of course, they claim, and burn them. They claim that, maybe this is a way to dispose of this idolatry and such, but I find it very interesting how they always tell everyone to destroy them, and then, of course, then they hide this history and don't tell anybody about it. Of course, you can actually read these old historical books. There's like 3 or 4 of them that Steve Quayle covered in his series, and talks about what's in them, and about these Indians that talk about seeing giants and what they did, and it mirrors quite well the Book of Enoch, Jubilees and Jasher, and Genesis Apocryphon from the Dead Sea Scrolls. All these seem to be all correlating quite well. Even the American Indians with their stories about the red-haired giants, all these stories seem to correlate so perfectly. You might think it's actually history. You know what I mean? History that we're not allowed to know about, of course. That's kind of the idea. And as you can see, there's tons of newspaper clippings. There is about 1,000 of them, literally telling you about skeletons being unearthed. Of course, strangely, all these skeletons, not all of them, but so many of them, there's still fragments. Probably I don't know how many fragments out there, but probably under 100 you can find of various, like, femur bones and thumb bones and skulls and stuff that are still around, but miraculously the thousands upon thousands that were excavated just disappear. It's just so strange how often it's the Smithsonian or the Vatican or someone within this realm trying to destroy them, or get rid of them, or hide them, or in the case of recent, maybe take them so they can get DNA samples and perhaps bring back the Nephilim, maybe as a super soldier. Who knows, right? So we have here the curves of the forehead are moderate and not retreating, suggesting intelligence, and connected with jaws of moderate development. So, I mean, I would encourage you to check out and find these various newspaper clippings and save them for yourself so that you have them in case we have more and more censorship online, which appears to be. New York Times seems to cover this a lot. You see lots of articles from the New York Times covering this. Skeleton of prehistoric Irish giant. Of course, this relates to the King Arthur and Merlin the Magician. The Merlin the Magician actually hired giants from Ireland to build Stonehenge. Now, it's very interesting. This recent Transformers movie has Merlin. It actually has King Arthur, Merlin dealing with the Transformers. I think the Transformers is, in essence, trying to mirror back to the fallen angels and the Nephilim. it seems to be sort of the story about them, and they just use these transformers as sort of a subjugate for it. You have Merlin actually going to a spacecraft that was crashed and talking to one of these transformers and asking them to help him to fight the hordes that were attacking Camelot, and they were also part of the story. So it's sort of interesting that in the real legends of Merlin and Camelot and King Arthur, and you never hear about this in the Disney versions and all the Hollywood versions of King Arthur, except for in sort of coded language with Transformers, that there were actually giants that they were dealing with, and even King Arthur himself perhaps was a giant from what's been unearthed at the alleged gravesite of King Arthur. It's very strange, you know, a very large coffin underneath a cross, the cross claiming to be the burial site of King Arthur. And of course, you never heard about this, did you? Until now, right? This is the kind of stuff they don't want you to know about. Okay, fine skeleton, 10 feet tall. A lot of them are usually between 7 foot and 12 foot tall. You've heard of these dwarfs, you know, with Lord of the Rings, right? And they always seem to be Scottish or Irish. You ever notice that? Well, a lot of these giants that helped out with building Stonehenge were very, very stocky. They may have been short compared to other giants. They were 7 foot tall, but they were very, very stocky, very thick boned. Sort of made me think of dwarfs. And maybe dwarfs compared to other giants, not dwarfs compared to us. They were taller than us, but they were very thick and stocky. Perhaps they were the ones that were very, very strong and could pick up such stones at Stonehenge and build it. You see what I mean? I mean, it's very interesting how all this stuff fits together. Skeleton of a person who had apparently 10 feet in height had been found at Dysart County, Louth, Ireland. There's a lot of them that are 7 foot tall in Ireland. From what I've been researching here. You can see there's like so many of these articles, but of course if you go to Snopes, it's all fake. You know, and Snopes was made around the time that the Clintons ran into all their problems, and they seem to be sort of an apologetics for all the Clintons' atrocities, and they seem to also be sort of a psyop in a sense of the elite to basically brainwash the public. And they work off, I pointed this out in my previous Smithsonian video, Smithsonian Exposed video, that they basically have these websites out there that put out fake news. They're literally made to put out fake news. One of them claimed to be a Zionist publishment, a Zionist news site. And it even says at the bottom, New World Order Media, right on it. And it even says at the bottom as well that this is fake. It's all made up. It's fictitious. It's for fun or whatever. And what's interesting is this website, all it does is put out fake news, sort of fake conspiracy theories, and then they're actually a springboard for Snopes to have a lot of articles. Snopes just goes through their website, every single article that this website makes, which the website says it's fake. It says right up front, it doesn't say it up front, it says it at the bottom in small print where people don't look, that they're fake. They're fictitious. They're just making up stuff for fun. Allegedly for fun, right? So Snopes uses this website to get all their articles to debunk. I mean, a 4-year-old could do this. I mean, the website says all it does is put out fictitious stuff. Anybody with an IQ of 50 could go to that website and debunk it all day long, because they even tell everybody it's fake. You know what I mean? So it's clearly a psyop set up. So they have these fake websites that are their plants online that are just a smorgasbord for Snopes to debunk, and anybody can do it. I mean, it's retarded. It's like trying to debunk Disney movies or something. Texas Antiquities, footprints of Aboriginal tribes of Texas, some interesting discoveries. Unmistakable evidence of the existence of a civilization far in advance of Redmond. Relics of mound builders, thousands of years old, skeletons of gigantic men. See, also I was watching a video, one of these videos, while I was doing research, and I saw a comment. Let's see if I have it here. Actually, I don't think I have it here because I've watched so many different videos. But there was a video that had a comment. I don't think it was this video. Let me see here. I don't think so. No, it was an older video. It had a comment on it about Google Earth and how they've actually went through and deleted certain things on Google Earth that are strange. Let's just put it that way. Things that shouldn't be there. If there's perhaps a hidden history we're not supposed to know about, right? So back in 2013, they actually went through Google Earth and actually deleted certain things within the ocean. And this guy said before the whole update, he went through and tried to map out all the different, strange anomalies in the ocean that he found, strange formations that seemed to be very man-made, or perhaps, intelligently made. Let's just put it that way, where they had 90-degree angles, perfect lines, sort of the layout of a city. From what he said there was what appeared to be buildings underwater, layouts of cities. He actually mapped out several very large cities, or appear to be cities, something intelligently made, perhaps by humans, perhaps by these offspring of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, these giants. Perhaps they were made by these giants. We don't know. But it was all deleted from Google Earth already, so you can't go and see it very easily now. So, there's obviously a lot of stuff that's being unearthed, a lot of stuff being discovered that points to a cover-up. There's even a guy that's going to be with Steve Quayle at his next event in Missouri that is going to be one of the speakers that was part of one of these cover-ups, where he was actually told to destroy. If I understood correctly what he said, it sounded like he's going to have this guy on as well, someone from Europe. I think he says it in this area here. Someone who was actually part of it, where he was actually told to destroy some giant skeleton that he unearthed. So, I mean, there's people talking about it now. There's people that send Steve Quayle a lot of information, a lot of evidence, various stories, various artifacts and things of that nature that are sent to him. So maybe check out this video and you'll see more about that. But so I've been just doing a lot of research on this. It's a very interesting topic. I don't think there's enough videos made about this topic, to be honest. I think we're just starting to see a lot more evidence come out, and there's not a lot of people talking about it, and the people that are talking about it are just kind of, some of them are just, kind of hashing it really quickly. I've noticed a lot of people quickly hashing this, because like there's this video here that has a lot of views, where he covers an article which I already showed was basically a fake article. So, I mean, like I said, alternative news network, right? This article was taken from a website that's called New World Order Media. That's fake news. That's literally just, it says right at the bottom, we're making up stuff. But I mean, the whole point is to debunk what they do. It's a really clever strategy the elite do. They put out a story on these fake websites that's sort of close to the truth, but it's actually a made-up story. It's got some errors in it. It's sort of made up. So, like, for instance, this one is saying that the Smithsonian admits to destruction of 1,000 giant human skeletons. Well, they've never admitted to it. They've likely done it. They've either hit them or destroyed them or something. We don't know what they did to them. There probably are thousands, and maybe it's 1,000. I don't know how many. Okay, maybe it's hundreds. I don't know how many they had, and I don't know how many they destroyed. I don't know how many they hid. The fact is, they did something. We know this much based on all the research, just looking at these old articles and the Smithsonian dropping by and getting the bones and no one ever seeing them again. But this article itself is a lie. It's a fake news because they never admitted to it. So then other conspiracy theorists latch onto this article. They make videos, they post articles on their own website, and then Snopes comes along and debunks it because the website admits up front, if you look at the bottom, it's New World Order Media, and it's fake. So this is how Snopes does it. This is how they do their disinformation campaign to shut down this whole topic, to leave it in the conspiracy community so it never gets to fruition in the public eye. This is how they are able to keep the truth hidden, is they leave it in the conspiracy realm. As long as it never gets into the broader public realm, they don't care. once it gets into the broader public realm, sort of like what happened with this last election, where YouTube became sort of a springboard for alternative news and coverage of what was going on, and because the voice got so big, it went outside of the conspiracy realm and the loony realm, I guess you would say, and went into the more mainstream realm and actually affected an election. That they're sort of pissed off about it, and that's why you see this whole shutdown on YouTube about, with the adpocalypse a few months back, and now they're going to bring in all these progressive groups to basically shut down you guys, anybody that says anything that contradicts the elite's narrative. If you're saying anything, it doesn't matter if you're for or against Trump. It doesn't matter, because the whole point is that it's not really about Trump. It's all about the narrative. They obviously wanted Hillary in. Trump was not their first pick, but Trump is not exactly our pick either, right? So, I mean, the guy's doesn't know really fully what's going on. He's not making all the right moves, and I think he is being influenced by these people that are in the higher up, but I don't think they have any control over him. It seems to be more just of an influence thing, and I think maybe he's making some right moves, some wrong moves. I think he's kind of like in the middle, and he's just thinking he's trying to run the country, but they're trying to figure out how they can manipulate him and get him to do what they want him to do. And they're shutting down pro-Trump or people that are just in the conspiracy community, truther community, anybody that has an alternative viewpoint. Even the atheist community is being shut down here on YouTube. So they don't want any of you voices out there that says anything that contradicts the government's or the elite's narrative. They don't want any of it, because they see you have a huge influence and you can swing things. They want control. At least on a peripheral level, they want control of what's going on.
Steve, in your book, True Legends, you talk about a Smithsonian cover-up whenever giant bones are involved. So I want to ask you the question that everybody always asks. Where are all the giant bones?
It's interesting, Tim, because of the bias of the Smithsonian and their contempt for out-of-place artifacts. Every time giants were found, it didn't matter if it was on the West Coast, the Arctic, the Antarctic, believe it or not, the East Coast, the Ohio River mounds. They always have a fabulous cutoff point, meaning once the Smithsonian is notified and those bones are sent to the Smithsonian, they're never heard from again. And there's denials. A good example of that, it was a famous Kincaid expedition to the Grand Canyon, where they found the Egyptian citadel. Even the Phoenix Gazette carried that story. So, Tim, the cover-up has always been to keep this biblically relevant topic out of the minds of the people, so at an appropriate time in the future, they can claim whatever they want to claim, and they'll claim anything and everything apart from the true biblical origin of giants.
So, Steve, even during World War II, there were reports of giants and cannibalism coming out of the Solomon Islands. What was that all about?
After World War II, people couldn't reconcile the fact that a lot of servicemen, U.S. servicemen, had been eaten, cannibalized, as well as Japanese. And the fascinating investigation I've come up with was the fact that the Solomon Islands are riddled with stories of cannibalistic giants and even living giants to this day. I was contacted by a man named Marius who was literally going to meet me in California with, let's just say this, irrefutable evidence. But he said to me on the phone, he said, Steve, I'm being followed, and I'm not sure I'll even make it there alive. What has to be asked, the question that needs to be asked and has to be asked, is that why do people who have the evidence, why are they intimidated? Why are they threatened? Why are they disappeared? What is this cover-up? And I'll tell you the bottom line. They do not want people to understand that the sons of God, the fallen angels, saw that the daughters of earth were fair, mated with them, and produced a literally new race of hybrid beings that the Bible calls the Rephaim. And the Rephaim are with us today. They're genetic trace, they're genetic markers. And when we get into super soldiers, Tim, the super soldiers, the most important expenditures made are to identify not only the bloodline, but the genetic traits. There are people literally not only wanting to bring the giants back, but to insert giant genes in our soldiers to give them the super soldier ability. More money is being spent to identify genetic traces and markers, the actual gene prints of giants, both dead and extractable DNA from their teeth, from whatever cells in the mummies, to literally living giants today.
So in other words, what you're saying is somebody's trying to weaponize giant genes.
Absolutely. And the super soldier program is probably one of the most almost unbelievable, yet so believable programs that the U.S. military is involved in. And all the underground labs, all the secret places around the planet, everybody's after the same thing. They want comic book heroes that we would only laugh about and have laughed about maybe for 50 years, and now it's no longer fantasy, it's fact.
And we're not just talking about superhuman strength, are we? We're also talking about superhuman cerebral capabilities that the giants had.
Absolutely. Speaking of cerebral capabilities, the giants, even when they're in a stasis state, that means in suspended animation, whether it's Dr. Ernest Moldashev in Russia, in the mountains of Tibet, whether it's a whole underground base in which some of these entities, these living giants, are present, they have so much cerebral energy that they actually have what's called the red line, and you can't go past that. Or literally, they claim, according to special operations, 4-star generals, that literally it causes a person to almost come apart at the seams. It not only drives people mad, but it literally just causes them to go to pieces. You understand that's the ultimate weapon. You know, Michael Crichton with Jurassic Park brought us dinosaurs, and now we're hearing about woolly mammoths being cloned, and we're hearing all these news stories that Neanderthal is no longer a member of our family tree, which I've said for 30 years. But the point being is that it's all about weapons. And as a general said to me in special operations, doesn't matter if it's ancient technology, doesn't matter if it's ancient genetics, those of us are either fighting to keep it out of the hands of the wrong people, or the wrong people are fighting us to kill us to get it into their hands. There's a war going on, and it's no longer just dusty old bones in a museum stuck away.
So Steve, according to Genesis 6, fallen angels had sexual relations with human women, creating these hybrid half-angel, half-human giants. In a weaponized, military weaponized sense, what other capabilities might these super soldiers have if they have the genes of giants?
Well, beyond the obvious of strength, beyond the obvious of almost supervision, super hearing, one of the most remarkable things from my 4-star general friend was basically said they hunt by DNA. Every person's DNA has a specific harmonic that they could identify a specific target's DNA and assign a Fido, the 19-foot giant, to go after. And it was interesting because when you think about it, even going back to Jack the Giant Killer and Jack Be Nimble, Jack Be Quick, as I've been researching all these, remember the statement? Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. You go to the Bible, and whose blood cried out? Righteous Abel blood cried out to the living God after Cain slew him. So the harmonics of blood is fascinating. That's why the cry of the innocent blood is such a big deal in God's eyes, and it truly is, because the blood has a signal, a frequency, and there have been studies to prove that. So they want the giants to be able to basically target specific DNA characteristics. Not to mention the bottom line, and you know how much I love to say that, these entities want every last human being destroyed, and in its place a hybrid. They're going to try and prove that God's a liar. Jesus himself said if the days weren't shortened, there'd be no flesh left alive, yet for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened.
You've turned down opportunities to work with some of the major networks on documentaries concerning giants. Why have you decided not to work with them? And furthermore, why have you decided to start your own production company, Gen 6 Productions?
Tim, it's just simply this. I believe the big lie that's going to be hoisted upon the world is that the aliens created mankind, which I categorically reject. It's funny, the people that will accept the fact that the Anunnaki, star creatures, came to this planet will avoid fallen angels like a plague. I wanted the correct, in my opinion, after 40 years of research, I wanted the correct historic and biblical presentation of the giants. And quite candidly, when I talk to some of them, if I start talking about fallen angels having sex with earth women, they snicker. Well, that snicker tells me they've already made up their mind. And I said, I will only appear on camera if I can have final edit of what I say. Guess what? Nobody wanted to do that. That tells me there's agenda. So I believe this is a time that you and I are going to basically go out and say to the world, okay, here's what those guys are saying, but here's not only what the Bible says, and here's how accurate the Bible is with the history that follows. Gen 6 Productions is totally different than everything else that's on the TV, everything else that's on the documentary. Everybody's looking in a rear-view mirror at history, just trying to find the bones and find the original documents of all of the different finds, and I've spent 20 years doing that already. But we're taking people, Tim, simply where no one else has ever gone before. They're starting from the premise that all the giants are gone. We're starting from the premise that there are modern-day giants now who aren't suffering from acromegaly or some pituitary disorder, but they're literally going to fulfill the biblical statement of Matthew 24, where Jesus said, just as in the days of Noah, so would it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Most people do not understand the evil. Most people can't even embrace the fact that this isn't about old bones. This is about a contemporary threat beyond any science fiction twisting of the facts. And that's why we're going to, I believe the best antidote, that's why we're going to do this thing, Gen 6 Productions. We're going to present information. We're going to present eyewitness testimony. Again, we're not just dealing with bones. Obviously, we'll follow the leads of bones, but we're going to show the people out there what the truth is and why this cover-up has been a multi-thousand-year cover-up, and what the expectation that everyone is going to, not only the expectation, but what is going to be presented to the people as the gods who made us. And I got to share this. When I did write the book True Legends, Genesis 6 Giants, Aliens and Fallen Angels, Angel Wars, everything I've written is to this point where Jesus said, if the days weren't shortened for the elect's sake, there'd be no flesh left alive. And the genetic tampering, the genetic destruction, the designs of the Luciferian globalists to destroy every human being on the planet, to insert their new creation, that we'll call him the Uberman, Nietzsche's statement, the Superman. What it's going to be is a super slaughter. And by giving people the correct information, by literally telling them what the end of the book is, how this plays out in history, my goal is to take away all fear and show them that the truth will make them free as long as they abide in the word of the Lord and the word of the Lord abides in them. Too many people are making too many excuses for the living God, and I'm looking for that time when the people of God will stand up, when the people of God will not take a back seat to the skeptic, whose the only agenda he has is what he's being paid to say. We're going to produce, I would say, such a different documentary form and style that I think people will be really excited, and especially to get involved with the Senate.
In other words, rather than looking for the giants that were, we're looking for the giants that are.
Absolutely. And I find it fascinating. Just as we're literally in the time of the movie of Noah, which was just a disaster biblically, it wasn't even anywhere near the scripture, but the times of Noah, isn't it interesting? The times of Noah, and now we got all this interest in giants. Hello, I don't think God could give a bigger neon sign than if he wrote it in the sky. And I'm not taking liberty, but even as everything is lining up, we are in the days of Noah. In the Noah days, there were giants in the land. And now we're having Hollywood just come out with movie after movie after movie, trying to denigrate biblical Moses, it doesn't matter if it's Noah, trying to distort true history so they can insert their own history. For instance, in the movie Noah, this is pretty fascinating. Most people don't know this. The fallen angels are the good guys, and Noah's the bad guy.
Yeah, they're called the Watchers, aren't they? In that
Yes,
movie?
they are. They're called the Watchers. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think what we're going to do is be able to give you a compressed, truly a compressed understanding of history that, when I say mind-blowing, it'll also be heart-freeing. It will help you to understand the headlines, the movies, and the ultimate plan and scheme for your destruction. But the good news is, Jesus said he'd never leave us nor forsake us. And I believe that, Tim, we're at that time in history now. We're in the days of Noah, and everything that preceded Noah building the ark and the judgment of Almighty God on this earth that was in rebellion is about to be relived.
Jubilees is not the only ancient text that gives a different story of creation. There is a forbidden book, lost for centuries, that includes fallen angels, bloodthirsty giants, and a warning to all humanity. It is an ancient writing filled with divine secrets, dreams, and visions. A tour of heaven and hell, guided by the angel Uriel. The Book of Enoch is named for the man who the Holy Bible says walked with God.
Enoch walked with God after the birth of Methuselah 300 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him.
The Book of Enoch is named for a man who's mentioned in one sentence in the book of Genesis. We only know one sentence worth of information about him. And yet, somebody stopped, paused on that name, and thought, Enoch. If he was taken up into heaven, what might he have seen?
It is a daunting manuscript. 5 volumes containing 108 chapters. For many ancient Christians, the Book of Enoch was essential. Yet it was banned from the Christian Bible.
We don't know why this literature was ultimately excluded from the canon. Perhaps it's because of its description of the fall of the rebel angels and their mating with mortals. Perhaps its understanding of the end of time fell out of favor with Jews and Christians.
The Book of Enoch begins with a warning to all humanity that a divine judgment has been rendered and a sentence will be imposed. God tells Enoch that all life on earth will be destroyed in a violent flood. And, as with the story in Genesis, God blames this evil on the sons of God, angels who lusted after the daughters of men.
These angels are sometimes referred to as watchers. They keep constant watch, and they decide one day, about 200 of them, that they're going to descend to the earth. They would like to very much make contact with these mortal women.
The Book of Enoch may have been an attempt to expand on the mysterious giants, the sons of God, and the daughters of the earth spoken of in Genesis.
Anytime you read the book of Genesis, there are all kinds of unanswered questions. Suddenly, there is this quick few verses at the beginning of the flood story about giants in the land that come from the sons of God mixing with the daughters of the earth. And you stop and think, wait a minute, what's this all about? It's like it went by too fast. And you want to grab it and say, wait a minute, what was this?
The Book of Enoch offers a disturbing vision of the fall of the angels who lust after earthly women.
And they began to go into them and to defile themselves with them, and they taught them charms and enchantments. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind.
That these angels have crossed over this boundary that they shouldn't have. They were spiritual beings and they were to remain as such. When they decided to descend upon earth, this unleashed upon the earth all sorts of problems. Not only these giants who are bloodthirsty and violent, but also these angels went on to teach humankind a variety of forbidden crafts. They also taught human beings how to make weapons of war.
Now the good angels, the ones not tempted by these beautiful women, go to God and say, you know, there's a lot of bloodshed caused by these bad angels. At which point God says we need to bind Azazel, the sort of lead fallen angel, to bind him and to then cast him into a pit. We might think of this as, how do we take care of nuclear waste in the 21st century? You take it out to a part of the world where no one lives, and you bury it as deep as you can. For this community, the angel was like that sort of nuclear waste. Dangerous, volatile.
After the rebel angels are cast into the depths of the earth, Enoch has a dream vision. The lead angel, Azazel, begs Enoch to plead their case before God, to petition the Almighty to release them from the depths of the earth. The request for clemency is denied.
This version of the fall of the angels was very popular in its day and maintained popularity for centuries to come. When we look at Dante's work on the Inferno, it's largely out of the material in Enoch. When we look at various snips of the New Testament, Enoch seems to be in play. In Corinthians, when Paul talks about women covering their hair so the angels won't be seduced and tempted, it goes back to the fallen angels tradition.
Another episode tells of Uriel, a powerful angel in charge of the stars, who becomes Enoch's guide through the heavenly realms.
Uriel's name, in fact, means God is my light. And whenever he is described, frequently in relation to God, he is situated to the east of God's throne. This is very interesting. Of course, the sun rises to the east. So this gets us thinking, Uriel, a figure associated with light, perhaps associated in some way with the sun, or the stars, or the idea of these heavenly bodies making their rotations daily.
And all these Uriel, the holy angel, who is the leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me.
And so something is going on here with the stars. It may well be going back to the role of astrology and the study of stars in the Persian Empire that is now giving rise to this new awareness that constellations aren't just constellations of stars, they're constellations of power. And through this tour of heaven, Enoch gets the information, and he knows where the powers are, and to know where the powers are means that you have access to the power.
With its lush descriptions of heavenly powers and the horrors that await evildoers, even angels, Enoch was one of the most popular books among the early Christians.
We know that some early Christians considered the writings of Enoch to be authoritative, to contain actual revelation from God. So, because some people thought that, some influential people thought that, the book was used as you would use other books of the Bible.
After all, Revelation appears in the New Testament. But Enoch, for reasons that I think are fairly clear, was just considered a little too strange, a little too suspicious, a little too creative, perhaps, for the tradition. Having said that, there's no doubt that it was widely read and very popular.
Yet the Book of Enoch was denied a home in the official Christian canon. This imaginative tale fell into obscurity until the late 18th century, when a Scottish explorer named James Bruce came upon this mysterious text in Aksum, a city in the Ethiopian highlands.
Travelers to Ethiopia found manuscripts of these books and brought them back to Europe. This caused quite a sensation. I'm aware of scholarly reaction to them. People were excited about having these texts that we knew about only through allusion before this time, or a brief quotation. Whether this raised any questions in people's minds, canonical questions, should we put these books in the Bible? I'm not aware of really intense discussions of that sort.
Until the mid-20th century, the Book of Enoch was assumed to be of interest only to the very early Christians. We now know that Enoch was sacred to Ethiopian Christians all along.
Part of the reason why this probably became part of their canon is because of the mythic story of the foundation of the Ethiopian monarchy. You have Sheba, who goes to see King Solomon, and the story goes that not only does she bring gifts, she brings a little bit of something back home. She's pregnant with Solomon's son. That son is Menelik. Menelik is the first dynastic king of Ethiopia. He actually goes back and retrieves the Ark of the Covenant from Solomon because Solomon is not taking care of the kingdom properly. And the Ark rests reportedly in Aksum in Ethiopia. So when Christianity comes later in about the 4th century to Ethiopia, there's already a story there. There's already a connection to the Old Testament story. So the Book of Enoch and all these other types of books that are included within the Ethiopian canon become part and parcel of putting together this Old Testament story, this Old Testament link, with a very new Christianity that enters into the Ethiopian. They don't give up the old. They put it all together with the new and blend it together.
Large portions of the Book of Enoch also were found among the Essene literature, hidden in the caves of Qumran, as part of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
What about when Joshua and the nation of Israel entered the land of Canaan? They were instructed to wipe out every man, woman, and child of certain tribes. I've talked to some people whose entire rejection of the Bible and God rests on this portion of the biblical text. This video is for those people. What no one ever mentions when recounting this issue is that according to the story itself, the tribes that they killed were non-human hybrids called the Nephilim, and they were huge. They had iron beds 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. It says that the Israelites were like grasshoppers in the sight of the Canaanites. These Nephilim were the offspring of very evil spiritual beings, and they were apparently the primary reason God sent the flood. Satan knew of the prophecies of one that would come to defeat him, and before any of the prophets came to expand on how this was to occur, all he knew at that point was that the Messiah would be a human. The Nephilim were an attempt to infiltrate the entire bloodline of humanity so that the Messiah could not be a full-blooded man, and if it weren't for Noah and his family, it would have worked. Then when Abraham found out from God that the land of Canaan was to be given to Abraham, Satan also found out, and he had over 400 years to plant this minefield of Nephilim in the land of Canaan in an attempt to thwart the plan of God. Genesis 6:4 tells us that the Nephilim were also on the earth after the flood, and it is them who Joshua was told to wipe out. Tribes such as the Rephaim, the Emim, the Horim, the Zamzummim were all giants. The kingdom of Og was the land of the giants. Later, we also find Arba and Anak and his 7 sons, the Anakim, also giants, along with the famed Goliath and his 4 brothers. Now, if you want to say, well, God should have let the 13-foot-tall evil hybrids bent on the destruction of humanity for the purpose of wiping out any chance for the redemption of man go, then you're free to think what you want. But please remember, this is according to the biblical narrative itself, which is where the accusations come from in the first place. The point is that if you're going to claim that you know that God is a tyrant because of this portion of the Bible, and you didn't know the rest of the story, just think about how many other issues there are in regard to the Bible where you might have misplaced